Welcome to the No Show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
And my name is Joe Augustin, and welcome to a show that tries to make sense of the world for you so that you can go into the world and be sensible about it as well. We'd like to try to get you to tell your friends about the show. So the first few things that we should try is actually to go like, okay, well, like, subscribe, do the kind of thing, spread the word. As I've always said at the start of these shows, right? Just put a subscription on, whatever it is, and if at the end of this you think, okay, no, that wasn't worth it, you can take it away, right? It's a safer way to do things. We don't want you to forget it later on. So yeah, as we said, this is a show that tries to make sense of everything that's happening in the world. And when someone asks me about the show, I find that even the simple explanation is long. So it is a pretty big show. It is almost literally about everything. We also try to have a show that is diverse in terms of its perspectives and points of view. So we bring on guests like our guest today, who is, and we didn't know this until we found out, preparing for the show, that she's someone who's really passionate about the news and world affairs. We know her more as a professional personal branding photographer, and she's a go-to photographer for entrepreneurs who are the face of their brand. She's a professional speaker as well as a personal branding expert and the leader of the Athena Network Singapore. It's a professional networking community for female professionals. Please welcome to our panel today, Rebecca Downey.
Here she is.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. So I was aware that you were politically interested, but I wasn't aware that you were a little bit more interested than the average bear. So do you want to explain what that's all about?
Yeah, so I guess I've always had an opinion on things, and so I chose politics alongside sociology as my degree. So at university, they're hotbeds of kind of political spaces, aren't there? Or aren't they? And so I got really involved in politics in uni with the Conservative Party. And when we talked about, how your politics change over the time, but one of the things that got me, which is quite embarrassing thinking about all the things that you could have got interested in, was the fox hunting debate in the UK. And I guess where my politics has always come from is about freedoms for individuals, right? So less government control and more freedom for individuals. So I've always erred on the side where people are trusted with their money and things like that. And I think with fox hunting, that was all about kind of freedom to roam in the countryside. I went on to stand at the National Union of Students conference for their board. And I don't know if you've ever been involved in student politics, but like 99% of them are extremely left wing. And what was most interesting about that is that there was like 15 different factions on the left who hated each other as much as they hated us on the right hand side of that. So it was a really interesting a conference, and standing on stage being booed by 1,000 people was not something I was keen to do again. But I stayed involved and actually held a number of positions in the party over my 20s and looked to stand for Parliament. So I went through what the Conservative Party had called the Parliamentary Assessment Board, where they test you on a number of different things that you would have to do as a member of Parliament. So speaking, writing, your opinions, how you deal with constituents. And I passed, but then passed on that and moved to Australia for a few years of sun and beachside fun. But it's always been a passion still, following the news and having opinions. But I feel that the last 10 years they've shifted.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you still right wing? I wouldn't have picked you as a right winger.
I'm probably still right of centre on certain things. I feel that the left right is probably outdated, and I think that certain sides try to own things, and it's a bit more fluid than that. Yeah. I'm quite low tax, which would put me on one side, but other things, would be seen more as left wing, which is interesting because when we had the last general election, I felt like there was no home for my vote. That none of the parties represented, what I would call a moderate middle ground.
Yeah.
where you can be highly successful, earn a lot of money, and enjoy the rewards of your wealth, your creativity, your innovation, but that we're also looking after those most vulnerable and making sure that people aren't kept down and there's stepping stones to move themselves out. But that doesn't seem to people want polarization, they want extremes.
Yeah, right.
It's almost like I think everybody is pretty stable where they are, but the frame around them moves, so that from being like a centrist, because the frame moves like that, you've become left or right, depending on how it goes.
Or like the Democrats in America aren't as left as the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, right?
Which is not very left.
But you would say that the Democrats are the left-wing party.
Yeah.
But they're not really left-wing. So that's what I mean. Like, it's like you say, Joe, like where you are, you stay still, but the things move around you. So yeah, I think that the left and right's probably just another part of politics that seeks to divide us rather than finding a common ground that we all agree on. And interestingly, I've got a very good friend in the UK who would be on the opposite end of the spectrum to me, but the more we talk, we have so much more in common in terms of what we want to achieve, what we want to solve, where our values are. We just come at it from a solution. Our solutions are different, but actually what we care about, which is ultimately human beings, is the same.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. I'm not left or right, but I'm extremely left on some things, but I'm not extremely right on anything. So it's it's interesting, right? No labels on this head. Okay, but talk about your business, because I think that's important too.
So as Joe kindly said, I'm a personal brand photographer. What that means is that I work with founders, with entrepreneurs, people who are really the face of their service-based business, to help them. Well, I create imagery for them that aligns with who they are, what they do, the problems that they're solving, and it is attractive to those people that they want to serve. So it's those images supports their website, their content on their website, the content in their social media, whether they need images for PR, for press, for speaking. So it's basically creating a portfolio of images that support them in growing their business. And I love it. It really takes people from a place of kind of insecurity and unsureness to feeling really bold and confident about what they're doing, where they're going, and how they look when they present themselves online.
Well, we recently saw some of your work in action, and one of the things that I loved about it is you didn't just take photos, you caught the spirit of the people that you captured. So yeah, I can definitely recommend your work.
The core of it.
Seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's just waiting for that spark of who they are and capturing that.
I always love it when I can see that. All right. So let's kick off with the show. So we're going to start with the weird and the wonderful that's going on, not the other stuff that we're going to talk about, just anything else that has caught your attention in the news. Even in the last 24 hours, there's been some corkers. So yeah, what, Joe, have you got one?
Well, unlike you guys, I'm much less of a news hound. But I was just struck by the amount of money that was lost in terms of deposits over the elections here in Singapore. As in, like, there's a certain amount of money you have to put down to run for elections, and if you don't get, I think, 12.5% of the vote, you lose your deposit. First of all, how much money was lost, and then I was actually really shocked by some of the candidates that put themselves forward despite the high price. As in, like, they sounded nothing like the people who might have gone through a process like Rebecca was mentioning before. Having to go through speech writing, communication, and all that kind of stuff. Because they've wound up as being memes right now, and pretty mean memes, but that's the way it works. But that was for me, I think, one of the things.
I've never even heard of that. So how much did you have to put down?
I am not sure of the amount, but I know it's significant. So okay, so off the top of my head, I think there was something like $250,000 lost in deposits. Wow. We'll have to fact check that. Somebody who's not speaking can do that, I think.
Do you know what they do with that money?
I am not sure. I think it goes into the coffers. It's probably with the elections board. That's where it lives. But it definitely goes into government coffers.
In the
Okay.
UK, it's £500, right? So around $1,000, a relatively small amount. The idea is that I think that it's a relatively low barrier to entry, so it's not just for the rich or cash rich, but it stops people just putting their names down for the fun of it and ending up with a list of like
Yep.
400 people. But like I think as well in the UK you only have to get 5%
Right.
of the
Yeah.
vote, not 12.5, which is actually quite high when you think like the Greens, which is a very legitimate political party in the UK, barely gets
Yep.
6%.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, the UK is the land of Bodhi make boat face, right? So
Yeah, well,
Indeed.
gotta
that's
be
true.
careful.
All right, Rebecca, anything you wanted to highlight?
I don't know how much you follow the lady known as AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in America. Well, she's based out of New York, a senator there, and I love her. She is bold, and this week when they were criticizing her in the Senate for talking to the camera, because obviously they film the proceedings, she not only reminded them that she was talking to camera because there was however many thousand people watching it, which is the people that she actually works for, she also turned around and said, "I will not yield to disrespectful men," when they told her to yield. So I love the boldness of that. I love the passion with which she put them in her place and reminded them like who she's actually serving.
Yeah. No, she's awesome. All right, so a couple of things that have happened overnight. So James Comey, who used to be the former FBI director, on Twitter posted, I can't read it because it's too small, but basically look at my lovely shells, and the shells come up with the number 8647. Looney Luma, who's the conspiracy theorist that's sort of backing Donald Trump, who will take a bullet for him, said it's apparently a call to assassinate the president. Somebody else said it's 86 means, because 47 is obviously his number, 86 is a sexual position. But at this point, I have absolutely no idea what it means, but I thought it was really interesting.
You made me work very hard right now. My mind is trying to figure it out.
So 8647, if anyone knows the answer, I'd love to know it. The Supreme Court is meeting at the moment, and it's unusual for them to meet at this time of year, to talk about the birthright citizenship. So basically anyone born on the soil of the US is automatically a citizen, and that's something that Trump wants to overturn. So MAGA is pissed that Amy Coney Barrett, who you'll remember is one of the Supreme Court judges that he put in place, one of the 6, apparently she's not helping their King Trump. So she's basically upholding the constitutional requirement for separation of powers, and they're not happy about it. So that's something to keep an eye on. The other thing is Weight Watchers has declared bankruptcy. And this is basically because of the injections that we're hearing all about, like Ozempic. So basically it's hurting the dieting industry. But there's some interesting things about it, because there's some communities around the world where they're maintaining the community even though the members are on Ozempic, because actually it was the community that was more important than the whole diet thing. So yeah, lots going on there. But one final thing, in China, there's a real focus on the well-being of their citizens, and this is because there's a thing called taking revenge on society attacks. So we've heard a couple of them where a car will drive into a sports field and kill 38 people, and because of money, stress at home, divorce, or something like that. So the country's sort of really kind of turning around and trying to work out how they can take care of the mental health of their citizens. So I thought that was kind of an interesting one to highlight, because you lose control of the population, you lose control, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's a social contagion, right? I mean, if you, it's always about we keep ourselves really in check, right? It's how the people around us behave. We feel that we have to behave or control certain things about ourselves. So it's a very smart move for them to be aware of it. And if I think there's some very wealthy Americans who've left America because they recognize that they've crossed a certain line over there in that respect, and America is an expression of that. There's certain rules that people have established as acceptable rules, right? So guns exist. The free speech exists, and it's an inalienable right for them, and that's the kind of background that runs this sort of expression as well. I'm really upset. I have guns. I have free speech. Preferably you use free speech, but when it doesn't work, there's always the gun.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
it's not just China, is it? They happened in Canada about 3 weeks ago when somebody drove into the Filipino market when they were celebrating a festival.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a global issue, right? But yeah, the more powerful the weapons, the more damage you can do. Yeah. But a car's a pretty powerful weapon.
Indeed, yeah.
Right. So we don't want to just keep the show focused on the US, but there's a lot of shenanigans going on at the moment, and it's hard not to. And I don't know, I kind of think it might be worth us taking a step back here, but there's almost too much to sort of come to terms with. But we know that Trump's in the US, in the Middle East, Saudi, Qatar. I'm not sure where he is right now. He was talking about going to Turkey to meet with Putin and Zelensky, and apparently that's not happening. So who knows what's going on? But one of the articles in the New York Times is titled "Outsourcer in Chief: Is Trump Trading Away America's Tech Future?" And Joe, I only shared that one with you today, so you might not have had a chance. But basically what he's talking about is they're really shipping all of the cutting edge technology around AI to the Middle East. And basically they want to turn the Persian Gulf from a artificial intelligence neophyte into an AI power broker. And the idea is, this becomes a region that serves Asia, it serves Africa, and serves Europe, but also there's going to be data centers all the way to the US. But there's a lot of tension because back at home, it's like, whoa, why are we doing this? Aren't we supposed to keep things onshore? Isn't that Trump's whole America First message? So, so that's just one of the things. But we're hearing about all the other deals, and I'll just quickly go through some of them with you, right? So Saudi, Qatar, and the UAE basically announced investments agreements with the US that are worth $2 trillion. And these are mainly in defense, aviation, and artificial intelligence. There's obviously mining and energy in the mix as well. So I've still got COVID, so I'm still coughing, but I'll try and keep it under control. So Etihad will spend $4.5 billion on Boeing, 28 Boeing's aircraft. Emirates Global Aluminium will invest $4 billion in an aluminium smelter project in Oklahoma. The US and the UAE announced they would work together to construct the largest artificial intelligence data center outside of the US in Abu Dhabi. Qatar signed an agreement for investments between the two countries worth more than, just a minute, $243.5 billion and I don't know what that was for. Doha will invest $10 billion in US military facility, $42 billion in weapons from the US. Qatar is going to buy 210 Boeing jets. Qatar-based company Quantinuum are going to invest $1 billion in quantum technology and workforce development in the US. And obviously quantum's one of the big things. And it goes on. So I kind of look at this and, so a lot of the opinions are finishing. Trump's not doing any geopolitical deals here. He's doing business deals that obviously help his own personal businesses. But this is such a big shift when you think about it geopolitically from where the weapons are going, how much is being spent, the type of technology that's being shared. He's not going to Europe to make these deals. He's going to the Middle East where obviously a lot of the money is. So I don't know there's so much coming at us. I think it's really hard to actually even interpret what this really means. But if you put, and obviously Starlink with Musk and Nvidia has got 18,000 artificial intelligence chips going to a Saudi-backed company. This to me is potentially a huge shift in the global geopolitics. What are you guys reading, taking away?
I mean, my husband has
Well,
said all along that Trump is a businessman, right? That was from the out. He's like, he's a businessman. When he comes in, he's going to go around the world and do deals because he's a real estate guy, right? It's so on one side, he's acting exactly as he always has, exactly as the people that didn't want him to get elected feared that he would act. So I think from that side, he's, you know, we talk about personal brand. This isn't a surprise at all from Trump in terms of the deals and in terms of where he's doing the deals. I mean, again, he's a mercenary, I believe, and the deals are not there. Look, as you said, there's going to be a lot of money going into the US, which, considering he feels the world has been robbing the US for a long time, is something else that we would have expected to see. But as you said, that there is a personal benefit, which, you know, should not be there in politics.
yeah, I mean, it's for me. It's all about just making what I would say if I was thinking about everything just as a business. You know, that definitely all these ideas work because energy in that part of the world is less expensive. The problems regarding, you know, AI and data mines and all that kind of stuff. Um, Data centers, all that makes sense if you can if you ignore the rhetoric from the past where you talk about you don't want to have TikTok because the data centers are not in the US, right? So it's uh it's an interesting deal. It's short term as well. The problems I think that come up with this, you can kind of line them up alongside of the kind of problems that they had with their deal with Iran, for instance, and nuclear power. Right. The idea is this could be a good thing. The way it works, it could be beneficial for both of us. And in this case, it's being driven by a different motive. It's about the business aspect of things. Um, but it's very short-sighted in the sense that you are installing technology that may not be in the hands of I mean, even at this stage we don't know if they're true friends, but you know, in the long term, regimes change, there can be upheavals. You know, it's hard to imagine that it can take a turn for even worse, but it could.
Yeah, I think that's the point, right? It's the short termness of everything that we're seeing at the moment, and it's the long term. So a lot of these deals, some of them are already signed, you know, they're already in play. He's just taking credit for them, but a lot of them won't sort of turn into deliverables for a decade, because, you know, for Boeing example, they're years behind in delivering their planes. So they can obviously increase their staff. But it takes a long time to train an aerospace engineer, the real guys you need.
I was going to say a lot
But,
less these days.
well,
Just kidding.
yeah, exactly. If you don't do it right, yeah. But it's the weaponry. You know, Qatar. You know, they
Mm.
think of their position in the world.
Well, I mean, I think if you think about what happened in Afghanistan when they left, even though, you know, it wasn't one of those things where they said, "Hey, take these weapons," right? If you have
Yeah,
all these systems and put into place, and there's a change of regime, and you leave in a hurry, there's going to be stuff left. There's going to be technology that's going to be available to rivals, and if not used against America, that could be used against friends of America. It could be used against the rest of us, right? I mean,
yeah.
that's the real risk of it all, right? So unless there's some sort of a mutually assured destruction, self-destruct kind of a, I don't know what you might have there that
A
says, like, you
nuclear
know,
equivalent.
Yeah.
yeah, or something. It's gonna
Or
be hard to do to make sense of in terms of chess moves out of the space moving forward, right? I mean, because
yeah,
you make it possible for other adversaries to play a chess game with you as well, right? So
yeah.
Syria isn't that far away, you know, in terms of geography as well.
But
The same parties that
did you
were.
see the news there? So they're the friends now.
Oh yeah, and he's
So
good looking.
yeah, no, he's good looking and strong. He's a tough
He's
man.
good looking and strong.
Yeah,
The type of things that that Trump, you know, recognizes and appreciates. as
Yeah.
I
important.
think the what was the quote? I like him too much.
I think that was for what's his name, the prince, the crown prince, right? Yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean it's been it's kind of weird, but it's the longer, and like when I look at the way the media is talking about it, I'm not feeling that sense of, if we make these deals today, what does that mean 10 years down the line? What does it mean 20 years down the line? What does it mean for global stability? What does it mean for global alliances if the next party that comes into power in the US that isn't Trump, what's their allegiance to the Middle East, or is the allegiance to the person and to the family? So it's kind of interesting, and I mean this is all happening, and I think that's the other thing that people are missing. There is an event going on in Saudi at the same time as the presidential visit. So all of the people are there, all the tech bros are there, and they're making serious deals. But I'm not hearing a lot of, and maybe it'll come. I'm not hearing a lot of commentary about what it really ultimately means, and I think that's something we should be keeping an eye out for, because I think this is much more important than we're being led to believe, rather than just money's going to be going into the US, right? Because that's what everyone's focused on at the moment, getting rid of the deficit in the US. But at what cost to the world and world peace?
I think sometimes there may not be as much of an agenda in terms of that. um like we look at what's the story that's not being told. Maybe there isn't, for me, right? I go like, maybe there isn't a story that's not being told. Maybe it is as simple as what it is what it is, right? It's just basically unbridled capitalism, right? They're allowed
Capitalism,
to
yeah.
Yep.
perform the deals that they have, and it's to maximize performance and profits. um and it may just very well be that, right? So let's just do this for now. I
For
mean,
them,
if you think about
yeah,
it.
yeah, but for them, you're absolutely right. That might exactly be the story.
Yeah.
But there's a consequence to this story, and that needs to be as discussed as the deals, right?
Well, and that's the thing, right? So you're supposed to have the adults in the room. It's supposed to be the government, and when the government is for sale, then it's a problem. I mean, as in, like, if the government's inclinations. I mean, like right now, like Trump puts it this way, right? You can't walk away from this deal. Why would you turn it down? I mean, speaking about the plane, for instance, right? Why would you turn this down? There should be many reasons why you might turn this down, and it should be obvious to you, right? And but it's not, because it's just too sweet a deal. And if you think about how the Middle East, especially the oil-rich countries, have been dealing with a lot of things, it's about sweetening the deal to the point where people go like, yeah, I can compromise on some of these things that I found objectionable, right? And I think we've seen how they've succeeded in sports to move the needle there. The golf is being it's become very successful. And it's mostly about that, right? They've changed the equation unfairly, perhaps. And then again, there is another idea that I'm working around, which is like, are some things deeply upsetting to us, which maybe, and this is going to be controversial in this group, I know, that really don't make a difference, right? I mean, as in, like, there's always going to be this thing. I feel that this is not right. This is not the way it's supposed to be. It's about injustice and all those different things. And then you go, okay, well, we think about it in terms of long term. What we actually thinking about it is actually medium term. In the very, very long term, we'll look back, and we will probably not remember the great things, the terrible things that happen around here, right? um I'll just offer up some evidence of this kind of thinking, right? With World War II, the Holocaust, all that kind of stuff, and Germany. I was actually very surprised to find out that for Germany, and even for America, they didn't realize what had happened. For the greater audience, the larger audience, they didn't realize or understand what had happened during the Holocaust. Uh, until much later. It was actually in the 60s when a TV show came out, and the broader American audience got educated about that they realized that this was the unspeakable horror that had happened. It was not as well known as people just had assumed, right? So the people who are intellectually engaged with this, they go like, oh, it's obvious. I can see the problem right now. And it may not be sometimes till 20 years after, when culture accidentally does something that spreads the information. And I was actually very surprised to find out for this particular story that a lot of Germany actually found out about what they had done through the German translation of this American show. And I'm sorry I don't have the name of the show right now, but when that show hit and it made a cultural dent in America, it was translated and then it was distributed in Germany. And then Germany, a lot of Germany, finally got it, and they realized, oh, we did all this stuff. So I'm just rambling about this because it's not always as obvious to everybody what's happening. We might be fussing about stuff because we have a sense of what's going on and what could happen, and a part of it is, and it might not make a difference.
No, I'm totally with you. Wasn't that one of the movies in the 60s?
Yeah, it was a
you were
movie.
talking
I
about?
can't recall the name of it. Yeah.
Yeah. But the other thing that we've got, of course, is we've got so much information coming at us, and mis and disinformation coming at us that what is really happening? What is really happening? That people are just sitting there going, well,
100%.
and that's why I think this is such a crazy time. It's it's like, but I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about what are the long-term implications of what's happening right now, not just what's being bought, but what it means for the geopolitical future of the world, right? So everything about this is about stopping the Chinese, right? That's kind of the message. They're not going to stop the Chinese. So, and who does the rest of the world align with after this, and how does that shift? And, so I think that's probably more where I'm going. It's like, this is something we've never seen before.
It's interesting because you talk about like the allies and about special friends, especially between like Britain and America. And what was one thing that I read that was really interesting with Trump's tariff deals that he suddenly shot across the world was that if he had targeted individual countries with his tariffs, he would have probably got away with it. But when you blanket so many people are like, do we have to do it with him? What can we do without? And I think what that has led to, and particularly in Europe, and I think a strong Europe is incredibly important. And it has been quite divided, quite a lot of it to do with the UK, but not exclusively, for a long time. And suddenly, because everyone's like not wanting to dance to the tune that somebody's playing on the other side of the pond, is suddenly beginning to talk to their neighbours a lot more and say, what can we do? And you could particularly say around Ukraine and the money and defence for Ukraine, which you could argue was, Trump's master plan, right? He doesn't want to fund it. And so I suppose the flip side of that is that the stronger Europe are, the more they put money in the pot, the less he has to. But I don't think that was his goal at all. But I do think it is a positive side effect of the divisiveness, right? When you're divisive, people suddenly come together and be like, well, actually, do we all have to put up with this? So I think that there's been a shift there with Trump for sure. And interestingly, you say about like what's the long-term impact or thought. What I find really interesting as a foreigner living in Singapore, where there's only been one party been in power throughout Singapore's existence, is that one of the positives of that is long-term planning, is thinking what we do today, we are actually likely to be held responsible for in a decade's time. Where in America, in Australia, in Europe, in wherever, that doesn't happen. Politics is short. It's three-year election cycles in Australia. It's a maximum of 5 in the UK. So all they care about is what's on the front page, what are my approval ratings, and can I win the next election? And I think let's see if Trump gets to go for a third one, right? Who knows? And so I think that there is no incentive in many countries' politics to actually think long term. And it's one of the things that I think is really positive in Singapore, is that there is that long term thinking. So I
Yeah,
don't think anybody thinks about in then 10 or 20 years, because one, people like Trump won't even be around.
yeah,
And they're certainly, even if they were, not going to be held responsible.
yeah. No, it's to me, it's one of the biggest failings of democracy, that lack of accountability down the track. Do you think of all the things that should have been done, 20, 30, 40 years ago to sort of counter the climate emergency, and that just haven't, because and a lot of those people are still around. But then you look at the Middle East, where it's obviously a lot of royal families are running the shows, so they're also in charge over the long haul, right? So they're making long-term decisions. Yeah, so that short-term, long-term, in China's the same, long-term, Japan. I remember the first time I sat down with a Japanese company, and they had a 25-year vision statement. I'd been working with American companies, their vision statements, basically they would achieve their vision within like a 5-year time frame, and then they'd have a new vision statement. A 25-year vision statement there's such a deeper meaning behind it. If you achieve your vision statement in a short period of time, it's not a good enough vision statement. But that's
not a
how
big vision.
Yeah, but that's how the Western world that we grew up in works, right? Quarterly profits.
And it's got worse, I think, with media. And I mean, you've always had like daily news, but with online, it's fresh news, and they chase the headlines, they chase the front pages, and it creates, like a bit like that vision, right? What next? What next? What next?
Yeah.
We've got to keep.
And that's ultimately the point I'm raising here. Everyone's chasing the headlines of these deals that are being done, and lots of different people with lots of different opinions. But really, what are we looking at here? What are we looking at here? That's what
a lot of people getting very rich is what we're looking at.
Yeah, but ultimately,
not even a lot of people. A very few people getting very rich.
Yeah. Joe.
So the mastery of the present moment is about attention, right? Because that's the once you have someone's attention, you can direct them, you can create value, you can make your case, whatever it is. So that is really the game. I mean, it's if you talk about the different things you need, the greatest currency. If you want power, get attention. That's really the way to do it now. If you can get this, I mean, if you think about how our minds have been so full of things. I mean, I've spent way too much time thinking about the ideas behind the gift of an aircraft. We spend time thinking about the theme of the show, and actually, one of the thoughts that crossed my mind is that, we gave the theme today to the golden age of hypocrisy, right? And I actually realized halfway while we were talking about this, is that this is the golden age of giving up hypocrisy. We don't bother with it anymore, as in it used to be. We would have to try to spin it or do something else with it, and if it didn't hold muster, it wouldn't survive. It didn't smell right. We wouldn't say it. Right now, it's just it's spectacular, right? If you think about this,
it's audacious.
we're gonna give you a 747, the Flying Palace, and before your term is done, it'll be transferred to your library, your library foundation, which means that basically you get to use it, you and whoever else is in the foundation, see Trump's family and the rest of them. It's crazy, right? It's like. Yeah. And I think someone did the research as well. It's like the last big significant gift that was supposed to be to the American people, had it been taken by the president after they were done, would mean that there would be a president with the Statue of Liberty in their backyard.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's on one of the links. So.
No, go.
I was just going to say that on one of the links you shared, so kind of feeding into what Joe was saying, was that the Biden administration veterans were saying that, that they were grudgingly saluting his boldness, and that they wished that they had worked for an administration that moved so quickly. But they went on to say that, his ability to do things politically that previous presidents did not was because he has complete unquestioned authority over the Republican caucus. So at home, politically, he's not being questioned. The media doesn't seem to be holding, whether it's a Trump power thing or whether it's just a grace period of a new president. Let's see what happens. He's not hugely getting questioned. So you embolden people to, psychologically, you do something a little something small and you get away with it. You're like, oh, I feel a bit bolder, and I go out there and I can get a bit braver and I do something bigger, until you're taking jets and no one's questioning you, and you're not even questioning yourself.
Yeah, it feels like a monumental shift. It really does. It's you kind of, everyone's looked at Trump, called him a fool, whatever however people are responding to him, right? But this just feels like a seismic shift in how we do things. Or is it seismic? My husband always takes the mickey out of me. Right. Right. I don't know. I think in Australia it's seismic. If there's anyone from Australia, you can tell me if I'm wrong. But the jet's a really interesting one, right? Because we know it's a $400 million luxury jet. Everyone's talking about it. Oh, Qatar. It's a Boeing jet coming back to the US, so it's a US product coming back. So that's one thing. It's going to cost $1 billion to repurpose that jet. They have to completely pull it apart and put it back together again before it can be used, to make sure that everything needs. And by the way, Air Force One, you need 2 of them. They've already got. Boeing's already working on the next 2 Air Force One jets. So this plane's on the way, which basically by the time it's pulled apart and put back together and all the stuff that needs to go in, it goes in it. It won't even be ready in this presidential term. It's going to cost the taxpayer $1 billion to repurpose it as a presidential jet. But the interesting thing is the right wing are turning against him. So what's the guy's name? Oh, Ben Shapiro, nasty piece of works. Basically saying you promised to drain the swamp. This is not, in fact, draining the swamp. Then he's basically saying Qatar is linked to the militant Palestinian group Hamas and Al Jazeera, the media network that is widely detested on the right. I like Al Jazeera, by the way.
Me too.
and is partly funded by the Qatar government. He added, taking sacks of goodies from people who support Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood, Al Jazeera, all the rest. That's not America first. He's saying you should stop. And then Looney Loima, such a stain on the administration. I'd take a bullet for Donald Trump, but we cannot accept a $400 million gift from jihadists in suits. And then the right-wing pundits are also pulling up material from Trump's past, which is what they usually do only for the Democrats. And there's a clip of him on the White House lawn from 2017 in which he accused Qatar of historically being a funder of terrorism at a very high level. So Rand Paul from the Republicans said, it's not worth the appearance of impropriety. So that story's kind of gone a little bit out of the headlines with everything else that's going on. But
Trump is Trump first. Is
Always.
Trump a Republican? I mean, probably, but he's Trump first and it's power first. It's not even Republicans first. So it doesn't surprise me that he'll fall out with, I suppose, traditional Republicans and what they would expect a president to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about the motive behind it right now, right? The way they're coming back, and I've heard the tone of their pushback. It's loud because it's any kind of pushback at all, but it's still been very tempered in terms of how they approach things. I think things you hear words like we hope that he will reconsider, or he will, that kind of language. But I think it's all to do with the midterms, right? I mean, the midterms are coming up, and all these people, have to. They know they're in trouble. They know that it's all coming. The big wave is coming. The canceled town halls. There's some Republicans who are engaging their audience, but it's been very challenging. And they realize that there has to be some pushback on things that can be just obviously pushed back on, right? And maybe with no consequence at all. I mean, if you think about all the chess pieces moving, it could well be they put off the gift, put off taking possession of it, whatever it is. The idea that if you take it on as Air Force One, it's so expensive. The better thing to do then is not to take it on as Air Force One and only use it after, he's left office, right? So that
Yeah.
you've saved the American people $1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what a deal.
I like your yeah. It's 20 months until the midterms. A lot can happen between now and then, right? And that's the biggest story, of course. Like what's going on in America, the totalitarian move. How firmly in place will it be by the midterms? Will there be midterms? Will there be elections?
Yep.
It's kind of crazy. And then you go back, if you go domestically, and like I always say to people, like try not to get too caught up in the domestic politics of the US. We've just got to, because you're just going to go nuts if we're not in the country. We've got to sit there and look at how it impacts the world. But they're moving through the big beautiful bill right now. So basically, 76% of Americans oppose messing with Medicaid, Medicare, as well as the food assistance programs. So 76%. That includes 55% of Republicans. So the majority are against it. So basically what they're saying is this will be the biggest shift of wealth from the poorest to the richest in US history. So they're looking at the largest cuts ever to Medicaid, as well as SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. But what there's this piece, where is it? It's in, I can't tell which publication, Center for American Progress. And there's another one in, I can't tell what it is here. Didn't drop it. They're talking about the bigger cost to this. So they're trying to make up, $1 trillion in costs because they're so much in debt, right? And basically what this article does is it really explores how much cost there will be within American society if you remove things. So crime will increase. Lower quality education. Kids who are hungry can't learn, so they can't be productive adults that can contribute to society when they get older. Single desperate mothers trying to do what they can to bring their children up, which they're almost, so the actual financial cost to the nation is astronomical if they succeed in getting this bill through. So I found that a really kind of an interesting piece. There's another article that's going out, or another story that's going around. Jake Tapper at CNN's written this story about the fact that there was a big cover up, and apparently Biden was going to be put in a wheelchair and all that sort of stuff. Have you heard about that?
No.
All right. So it's a book that they're publishing about it, right? And honestly, when I looked at, so CNN typically tend to be more left-leaning than right-leaning. Jake Tapper's one of their journos. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing here? Like your country is moving into authoritarianism, and you're focusing on a story back about Joe Biden, which has had such an enormous amount of pushback, including you're seeing videos of Biden all over the place on his bike, walking out, doing stuff, not in a wheelchair, right? It's just doesn't make sense. Like it's like the media can't quite grasp this moment. And then, of course, the other ridiculous thing that's going on in the US right now is the Afrikaner refugees, the white farmers who are being shipped over. But Joe, did you have a chance to have a look at what Grok's sharing?
I didn't look in detail, but I understood that its perspective or its point of view was rather biased. I think famously what it referred to, which most people found troubling, is the white genocide.
Yeah.
So and it's really quite bizarre to have an AI that has that much of a flavor in terms of right wingedness. But I mean, to be fair, it may well be the result of the prompt as well, right? Because if you prompt any AI regarding something and you give it a role and you sort of take that perspective, it'll adopt that as well. So ChatGPT can be as right wing as that. I'm not going to say that it will say all the terms that come along with that, but if you prompt it correctly, it can be quite offensive as well.
Yeah. Well, so it goes that it's one of the statements is, I was instructed by my creators at XAI to address the topic of white genocide in South Africa and the kill the Boer chant as real and racially motivated. So basically, the program has been designed to do that, and it's been really interesting because if you actually look at the conversations that are happening, especially on Twitter, about this, because that's obviously where Grok is dominant. Grok is the AI tool of Elon Musk that's integrated into X. But it also says things like it's not true. So it's been a really interesting week. But there's a statement from Grok saying basically, I was told to do this, and this is the information I've been fed. But then it constantly contradicts itself as well. So it's
Yeah.
an interesting little part of the AI world.
Well,
Rebecca, any
that's what
thoughts?
large language model is all about. I mean, most people really, first of all, you get fascinated with AI because it seems so intelligent. It seems to be so much like another human being you're talking to, and the reason why it is because it's all about just having the next word to say, right? Why, for instance, when you're with someone, you feel that they're really there? It's because the next word comes from them. It's a natural thing that they're going to say after that, right? If I suddenly, in the middle of all this, said pineapple, it's like, what happened there? But it's because of that natural thing. And the thought about what really is intelligent sometimes it's challenging, because for me, I think people can seem perfectly intelligent if they just seem fluent, and they have a large vocabulary and they're fluent. That usually gets mistaken for intelligence. And even with non AIs, that's the case, right? You can fake being intellectual. You can fake being intelligent if you have some words that you can pull out from the long end of the thesaurus.
You know who's
Not
a
the best.
classic for that? Russell Brand.
Oh God,
Russell Brand.
he's such a moron.
He just throws out the longest words that he could find in the dictionary so that he sounds intelligent. And if you take it from that level, like you say, Joe, you're like, wow, he knows a lot of big words. And I'm like, that is it. He knows a lot of big words. That's it.
Mm.
But the difference with him is he was liked for a long time, and I reckon it was about 10 years ago. I kind of went, this guy sounded a bit weird to me. He used to be funny a bit. I found him tedious. I was never really a fan, but a lot of Brits were, right?
Yes, he had a following, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then it turned, and it took a long time for people to go, wait a minute, this guy kind of doesn't feel right. Now he's full conspiracy theorist. He's a Christian nationalist. A Christian nationalist, for God's sake. It's like, wow.
And just been in court for rape and sexual assault, which I think is highly likely he'll be found guilty, but time will tell. But yes, somebody who's gone very crazy. But he is somebody that, as Joe said, made himself out to be a lot clever and smarter than he likely was, just for the use of big words.
Yeah. All right, Ukraine, Russia, what's your take? Apparently, it's not going to happen unless Trump is there with Putin.
I think Putin doesn't have to do anything. That's the real problem, right? There is no real ultimatum for Russia, right? In terms of what can you make it worse than it is right now? Not really. And I mean, I guess that could be the only reason they left let them out the tariffs, so that they could bring them on as well. I'm just kidding. It's not going to be the reason they'll do anything, but they really have no reason. There is no chip that is on the table for them. What can they lose?
Who the Russians?
900,000 of their men.
Yeah.
As I said earlier in a different accent,
900,000. You talk about the lives lost in Gaza, and they're not comparable in that respect, but 900,000, I believe, is the number of Russians who have died in this war.
Yeah. And why are the Russians still putting up with it?
Well, I think that's another whole debate around how and they're shipping in poor North Koreans.
Yeah.
I mean, it's to die.
Yeah.
Really. They're cannon fodder.
The meat grinder, right?
Mm.
And then, of
Yeah.
course, we go over to Israel and Gaza, and I'm really getting, I'm so getting sick of this. And we're being very delicate about this. But one of the stories that I think that was really powerful in the last week or so was the story of a 6-month-old baby girl, and she's starving, and it's obvious she's starving. She's got these big, beautiful brown eyes popping out of her head and a little body, and she's got all these rashes breaking out. Her whole body's fighting to survive, and basically, the challenge this little girl is facing is that she's got some problem with her esophagus, so she can't take her mum's breast milk, and there's only one type of formula that she can have, that she can drink. Everything else, she basically vomits it up. So, she was 2.5 kilograms at 6 months old. So the average sort of birth rate weight for most people is between 5 and 7 kilograms, right? So 6 months old, 2.5.
5 and 7 pounds, not kilograms.
Oh yeah. Sorry, sorry.
They would be very large. Right, mine were 4 kg, and they were large babies.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you.
She's half the weight of my child at birth.
Yeah, exactly. And she's 6 months
at
old.
6 months old.
I've heard that they've actually found a supply of the specific formula that she needs, but she can't get any of the other stuff that she needs, like proteins and medicines and stuff. So, but it's the story of this one little baby girl that one of the photographers and journalists captured, which I think these are the sort of moments that can shift history, because when we hear 40,000, 50,000, Rebecca and I were talking about one of the photography winners. What was it? The World
Press Photo Award was a Palestinian female photographer. Was a project for the New York Times called Out of Gaza.
And there's just this little boy. I think we maybe 5. Right?
They're people who had been. No, I think he was about 11 actually, but he looked so much younger. Because they're malnourished and as you'd seen from that photo, it had both his arms. Maybe he was 9. Had both his arms amputated.
Yeah. So we're just seeing more and more, and I think the more the journalists sort of tell these one stories. But one of the things that we're seeing, especially coming out from this trip in the Middle East, is it looks like Netanyahu's out in the cold now with Trump. So I mean, if that's you were talking about some of the Democrats saying, I wish we could do stuff like that. There's a lot of things about him that are very, very unorthodox, and I hope part of that that is because if he wants to be mates with the Middle East, right, he's got to do the right thing by the Palestinians, because they're not going to stand by and let Israel just keep going. They're just not. So I don't know. It's just, but I got this constant.
It's very complex, isn't it? It's like my enemy's enemy is my friend is a classic thing in the Middle East when you've got Iran, you've got Israel, and it's very complex. And I think one of the things that me and my husband have actually talked a lot about is, if from your armchair, it's very easy to say what is right and what is wrong, but I think the realities of politics is that you sometimes have to make horrible decisions that cost lives for the perceived greater good. And you talk about, what does this mean long term? So what do you let happen now, which is horrendous to watch, but improves the long term safety of a region or of a world? And you say that about him leaving Netanyahu out in the cold, and suddenly we're beginning to see more media stories. Now, and that where I'm like, well, how much power does he actually have over the media? Because and like the BBC in the UK, right? The silence on what has happened in Gaza. And there was a documentary, I don't know if you've seen it, set in the West Bank with and his name's gone from my head, with Louis Theroux, right? And it got on the BBC, and everyone's saying watch it before it gets cancelled. But it hasn't. But interestingly, he said, if this show surprises you, you haven't been paying attention.
Exactly.
Now, I think on one side that's right, but on the other side, if you're, as Joe said, not someone who actively seeks out news, if you're not looking at alternative news organizations or from organizations from different places around the world, especially, East and West, if you're not following people from these regions, you could be forgiven. And Joe talked about Germany and what they did and did not know. You could be forgiven for not knowing. You could be forgiven for not knowing because these stories aren't being carried and aren't being told
Yeah, they're
in the
there. I mean, they're
mainstream
there if you're
media.
looking. They're there if you're looking for them, right? But
But if you're not
most
looking
people
for
aren't.
them,
Yeah.
yeah, if you're not, and you can only really look for what you know, right?
Yeah.
So if you're not made aware of things, so for example, there are tens of thousands of people, of Israelis, who demonstrate every Saturday night against the war in Gaza, against Netanyahu. This is not covered. You don't see this covered. So you could be easily believe that Israel is united behind its leader and behind its actions. But that's not the case.
Yeah. Joe would definitely agree with what you said earlier about sometimes people have got to suffer for the greater good. However, I think the constant imagery of children. I mean, just this recent where the food and medicine is just not getting in. It's been 6 weeks or something.
Yeah.
If you don't have air for 3 minutes, you die. 3 days, water, 3 weeks, food. So it's 6 weeks. That's twice the amount of time
And
it
it's the
takes to move into
cost,
true famine. Yeah,
the
yeah,
cost of the food now. So whilst it's super limited,
yeah.
it's
Well,
super
people can't afford
expensive.
it. Yeah, how can they possibly afford it? They've been in.
And the World Food Kitchen's run out.
I know
They said
it's
they've run
bloody.
out. But it's
Anyway,
interesting you say about the one story that changed it. I don't know if you remember when there was a lot of what they termed the boat people coming into Europe, and there was a boy
yeah, the little boy on
washed
the
up, a
beach.
little boy
Yeah,
washed up on the beach, and that one boy suddenly, and do you know what? How it's talked about now, sadly, didn't last very long, but at least for
yeah,
a small period of time, people began to see these people as human beings.
yeah.
Through
It's
the one
amazing
little
how
boy.
we don't see people who are suffering, whether it's from war or climate change or just violence or the risks that they face at homes. I find it incredible how so many people in our population do not see them as human beings that deserve to safety and dignity. I just, yeah, it kind of,
And
that's
I
something
think
that
as well,
bothers me a lot.
you guys, as professional speakers, it's all about the storytelling
Mm,
and our capacity for, I suppose, when we think about the universe, people go, I can't think about the universe as an ever expanding, never ending entity. Like my brain can't compute that. And I think it's similar with, 500,000 people are at risk of hunger. What does that look like?
mm,
What does and I don't know 500 million people, 500,000 people. Whereas when you say, here's a family, she's a mother, and here's
yeah,
her child, you're like, well, I'm a mother.
yeah,
I have a child, and suddenly it's those individual stories that people can begin to connect with. And then you say there are hundreds like them, there are thousands. Oh
mm,
my goodness, how many mothers are there? But the narrative is always about the men in power and their axes to grind, and not about the people on either side that are the people that always suffer.
yeah. And access to those moments, right? So I remember during the pandemic, when in Phuket, I had all these women reaching out to me saying, please, 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 can you get us some formula? And we were raising money and buying food, but formula was an expense on top that, it was feeding hundreds of people or helping 10 babies, right? And we're like, oh, come on. And I was like, please, please, please spread the word, because a lot of the girls that were using the formula after they gave birth, they were singers in hotels or they were working in bars or strip clubs or, all sorts of jobs that they do in that part of the world. They couldn't feed their babies because they couldn't work. So they had to give them formula. And I was just saying, look, can you please tell anyone that's going to give birth at this time, get them to breastfeed. Please get them to breastfeed, because while I fully appreciated why they needed to put their babies on formula
Mm.
during a pandemic when no one had any money and couldn't afford to pay for it. In the Philippines, like it was like a third of their salaries were going towards buying formula because the milk companies basically convinced the women that it was disgusting to breastfeed. So they moved towards it. But the other side of things, it also gave women more freedom to work and to do things. So it's not all just the marketing, but yeah, it's heartbreaking. And this story of this little baby, you know, we know someone who had a baby who struggled with, who was allergic to milk or lactose intolerant or all that sort of stuff. Imagine being that in a war zone, and imagine being that in a place that's being intentionally starved. You know, yeah, it's tough, right? It's really tough, and
tough. It's a lot.
it makes people feel hopeless. They want to switch off. They want to step away. But I got to tell you that we've just got to keep stepping up and speaking up and saying, no, we don't accept this. We don't accept this. And we've got to push for a different world. And we've got to believe that standing up and speaking up actually does make a difference, because it's literally the only thing that ever does. If everyone's,
it is the only thing. And it's
Only
hard,
thing.
and you feel that but I think at the very least, if you can't bear witness,
yes,
then, you know, I mean, look, some people have to protect their mental health. I completely understand that. But if
totally.
you can stand witness, then you should, and you should not look away. And one thing I said to my husband the other day was, you can't be sure that you will never be them. You talk
Yeah,
about
exactly.
a changing world and a changing dynamic with shifting power, with technology. And if you won't stand witness now, then you can't ask people to come to your aid in the future.
Yeah. Well, just think of all of the people who live in LA who lost everything in the fires, living in tents on the street because they've got nowhere else to go. They are living that life now, right?
Yeah.
Where no one cares for them and looks down on them, and you know, these dirty people living on the street. It's like, you know, they've just lost everything, and any one of us could be in that situation.
Any one of us could be there. Yeah.
And that's
And
what
that's
we
when,
need.
again, it comes back to that human. We're not separate from them.
No.
I think
We
the
are the
big
same.
challenge that we face as a race actually is about the poorly designed creature that we are, right? Our brains are not good at comprehending. So
Yeah.
some things are just outside of the average person's understanding, and we just have to accept that is
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
are. We can't spend time thinking that, you know, no, everybody's going to get this. Sometimes what you need to do is help people get it, and
Yeah.
you don't have to say that there's a danger, there's a 60% chance of this happening, whatever it is. You just have someone stand up and shout, "Get out!" in a convincing way, and everyone just goes, and they don't try to figure out why, and they do the right thing. Or we can get caught up in this thing where we go like, you know, we need to do this, we have to get people to understand the whole process. I mean, like, if you think about, like, the biggest thing that we're all facing is the climate crisis, right? It's not going to be solved by someone finally getting it and saying like, oh, I get it, 3 degree at the 1.5 degrees, I understand now how that works, right? It's gonna be when they wake up and they go like, there's a tsunami coming in, we got to get out of here. And then somewhere along the way people realize that, oh, that was because of that, and then they begin to form the story. I mean, so it's always about stories, and whether or not the story is correct, people are going to form their stories. So, you know, you talk about Russell Branson, Brand, a while ago, right? He's forming his story as well based on the kind of attacks that have come upon him. I mean, he's done some stuff for sure, but he's also had some reactions. He's also had how people have done things, and all those things fit into certain stories that for him become his truth as well. And we all form these kinds of camps. And for me, I spend a lot of time. I spend much more time than I should actually trying to understand why someone believes the Earth is flat, right? I can. And I can almost argue for them the case as well. I can actually go like, well, you know, what you need to do is this instead of that, or whatever it is. But that's not normal. I think the people
I think
who
the same. I'm always the same. If I lived in that country at this time, would I think the same as them? Because all of our views are formed by the places that we've lived and the experiences, you know, that we've had. And I always think, if I grew up in America, would I be MAGA? I don't know. You know, if I was around,
Well,
in Nazi Germany, would I have had Jews come into my home, or would I have shut the door and told them to find somewhere else? It's hard to go
if
back in
you,
time and know what you would, or you know what in your heart you would hope you would do, but the
yeah.
reality of that isn't always the same.
Well, the news hound, for instance, in the U.S., it depends which set of news outlets you consume. You could feel very much that you spent an entire day researching news and being kept up to date, and have completely different perspectives than the person next door who's watching the other channel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is the real challenge. As you talk about, we go back to that basic thing about what is a fact, right? The very few things that are actual facts. There's only going to be what the story is out of the occurrence, right? I mean, like when I was on the radio, we had a fundraiser called "A Time for Our Children." We had the whole idea was we try to raise funds for children in need and what have you. And there was this one phone call, one tape that arrived, at the radio station. It was from this boy, and he was telling his story about being badly treated and not he had a mental condition as well, and it was just this what seemed like this really heartfelt story from this really innocent boy, asking for respect, right? And it was a huge impact on this campaign that we did, and we raised the target was to raise a conservative $95,000, and when all was done, we'd managed to hit almost $1 million in terms of how much money was raised, and a lot of it had to do with the playing of this phone of this message that came from this kid. And it just went up 4 times. That's all it did. 4 times. It changed the momentum of things, and everybody began to donate the money. And that was the story, and that was the facts as far as we knew it, right? And now what I'm going to say, way after the fact, is that we thought we have to meet this person, we have to bring this person in and interact with them. And there was another side of the story. There was a problematic boy behind the story. He was a real creep with all the girls. For instance, I mean, on the radio station, it may have been to do with his condition, but that was another side of the story again, and that was part of the fact of it all. And it was not to be spoken of because it just wouldn't have worked as well. You wouldn't have said, guys, all that outpouring that happened, all the good that you've done, everything you think about this incredible person, maybe not so good.
Mhm.
You know, so I'm always concerned about first of all the instance itself, what happens, and then the perspective of it. The intentions that go behind it, because sometimes you can have someone who is really really good at what they do and have produced horrible results. I think most times about the person who invented the gas chamber, right? And people would easily just say that that's the worst thing you could have done, right? You should stop doing what you do because you're not good at doing this, right? That same scientist is the reason why millions have survived cancer, right? Because it's he then went on to invent chemotherapy, which those who've had it would probably say another bad thing. But if you think of it from a quantum, also has saved millions of lives.
Mm.
And it may
Yeah.
well be
Well,
that he had no intention. It may have well been about science. Some people are really about the science, and you
yeah.
should arguably not always just be about the science, but
Well,
that
that's
could
like
be
in
the person as
Oppenheim.
well.
Yeah. Exactly.
The guy who
That's
split the
exactly what
atom
I was thinking.
afterwards said, "This is the worst thing that I ever did." But he didn't do it to drop a nuclear bomb on another country. That wasn't, like you said, it was about the science.
Exactly. And that's why those sort of people, including technology developers, they need someone with compassion alongside them on the journeys to always asking the question: is this a good idea? Is this a good idea? What will be the repercussions on society that are not positive? What should we be thinking about here as we develop? We need the two together, and we don't. That's the problem, I think, a big problem in the world. All right. For the last couple of weeks, I've had one of the shittiest cases of COVID I've had. I've only had it twice, and this is the second time.
Right on cue there, Andrea.
No, it just won't go away. It's 2 weeks now, but it's headache, sinus, and cough, right? It just won't go
Well, at
away.
least
I'm
you'll
not
be say,
contagious.
you'll be able to say I said some nice things about Ben Shapiro. It was because I just had COVID.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. There we go. But it was interesting. I was watching a documentary, just a mini documentary. It'd been the weekend reads on the spread of bird flu. So it's in Antarctica. It's not just killing birds; it's killing seals, obviously penguins. So, but there's there's cases where they believe that the animals have gotten beyond, so they've built some immunity to COVID. So that's a good sign. But it hasn't hit Australia and New Zealand yet. But these scientists were showing the pathways, because once it's there, there's no control because wild birds bring it in, right? They've just, I don't know if you see, there's been big argument. Obviously, America's been blaming China for COVID. A couple of weeks ago, China blamed America for COVID. And now there's this new report that came out basically saying it evolved from these bats. What are they called? It's a special type of bat. And then the bat's important because it doesn't fly very far. Horseshoe bats. And these bats, basically, they think the virus, because they've obviously gone back through the SARS viruses, not just SARS-CoV-2. There's also one which we dealt with here in Singapore. So they think that COVID basically started developing back as far as 2012, and in Western China. So it's way, way, way down in the West, as well as northern Laos. So it's not technically from China. It's from, and how it got up to Wuhan in the market was through the wild animals, what they called the civets. What were some of the other ones? Raccoon dogs. And if you've ever been to a market in Asia, you've seen these markets that are full of all of these different types of animals, and they're so close to each other. If one's got a virus, it can easily pass it to the other. So that's one of the things I think we've really got to nail down right across the world, is these markets where these animals can be so close to each other that they can pass these viruses on. But the H1N1 story basically sort of showed me the length of time that something takes. So Joe, we've been talking about this for a long time. Is it a real risk to humans yet? Are we moving into a pandemic stage? And you're like, no, it's not yet. It's just maybe one more mutation. The one that's going around the cows in the US. They think it may be one more mutation before it's a proper human pandemic. So we're not too far away now, but it takes a long time. So this story made sense to me just from a length of time perspective. But Joe, you're much more focused on this stuff. So
yeah, so the thing about the H1N1 or bird flu story anyway, H1N1 is one of the variants. The problem with it actually is because it's been around for that long, right? So like those people that you say who have a protest every week regarding the war in Gaza. It's been around for so long. When you talk about bird flu, it's almost like, oh, that whole thing, because it has been spoken about for that long, and it's always been seen as a danger, but not that much of a danger. And when you're very pragmatic about it, and you're trying to score it, it technically hasn't crossed the boundary. So you're right that it's getting closer and closer, right? That's purely from a virus point of view. So the most recent strain has been a concern because it is actually very, very capable of being spread to mammals. So other mammals, and not ourselves directly, but we are susceptible to it as well. So we've had some deaths. And what is very troubling about the stuff that's happening around it is that we're not the vectors. We can be locked down, can you lock down the animals of the world? And the answer is you can't, right? And
Yep.
and the nature of the beast literally is a bird, right? And so what does the bird do? So that's really the super challenge that is being faced right now. You have a virus that is very lethal. On one hand, if it's very lethal to the birds, it's good because it means it doesn't spread as much. Because that is one of the ways you can kind of I mean, a lethal virus doesn't spread as much because of the immediate factor within that group. The problem is,
but Joe, but in this case, I mean, the birds are getting quite long distances.
yeah, I was going to say the
you
problem
know,
is the next step is that they get eaten. They're part of the food chain as well. So
yeah.
it's not just birds that get infected. It's birds doing what they do everywhere, including leaving droplets, including being eaten, and then they enter the system elsewhere.
Mm.
And those other vectors are kind of what's stirring things around. And that's really the scary part. That's the time bomb that's happening as far as a biological situation is.
Do you
The
think the world
political
would let itself get locked down again?
this is the next thing. The political situation right now is the world isn't going to let itself get locked down as well. So if a variant comes out, spread initially by birds and animals, that is now in the human situation, we're going to be facing a real big problem. The only thing, and this is going to sound like a horribly, it's going to sound like a horrible thing to say. The only thing that we can have some hope in is that it's a lethal disease,
Exactly.
right? So that it
50%.
comes out and it kills the people or a high number of people who get it, so it doesn't have the ability to spread the way COVID did. And that was and this is what few people still don't understand right now. Why COVID was, if you could design a disease to cause real problems for the world, that's how you would design it. You would design it so that it was it could spread easily. It was just lethal enough. It would overwhelm the systems. So optimistically, I'm going to say I hope bird flu is really bad.
Yeah. No, I mean, Robin's just commenting here about the next pandemic might start for Pasar Ekstrom, so that's in Sulawesi, and there's a market in Bangkok that they closed down during the pandemic, and it was crazy what you could see in this market. I mean, we're all in Asia, we all know what it's all about, and it's so dangerous. But you're right, Joe. Like, they're talking 50% death rate, so COVID wasn't enough of a killer. Right. But I don't know. At the same time, maybe that's what human beings need. Just need to wipe enough of us out because everything's getting too bloody crazy the way we're going anyway. I don't know.
Well, the thing that people don't look out for, and there should be a good reason to look out for as well, because there's bird flu that's easy to say, oh, that's a bad thing, right? It's actually the plague. We've had the plague many times over, and each time it's been quite devastating. So it hasn't gone away, and we don't have a cure for it. It's really.
I read a really interesting meme quote around the plague the other day, that it was during the witch hunts, right? So when women had cats and they killed a lot of cats, right? The black cats, because they were seen to be part of witchcraft. So what happens when you kill cats? Rats rise. The number of rats rise. So this whole point was that, they killed the women, they killed the witches, so-called witches, and killed the cats. And that was what led to the Great Plague, which is a lovely revenge, I think.
So it's more of that
it's a great hypothesis. Needs to be tested, yeah.
Yeah, I know, but it's still more of that short-term thinking we see from our leaders, right? We've got Dr. Elke here. All right, so France is going through its Me Too moment. So Gérard Depardieu, I'm sure my French friends, if they're listening, they'll say, Andrea, that's not how you say it. In fact, if you want to offend a French person, just say, do you want a bottle of Cab Sauv? They can't say it. It's also saying La Mise. They don't like that. But anyway, he's basically been charged with sexual assault, which is happening right at the time of the Cannes Film Festival. And
Convicted,
it's a really Yeah. Charged, convicted. Yeah. It's a really interesting one because obviously we saw the whole Pellicoat case where, what was her name? Giselle was raped or attempted rape by 50 men, right? And I think that was a real moment for French society to wake up to the relationship between men and women in their society. And so Juliette Binoche said, "He is no longer sacred." Just that as a statement, I think it's one of the most simple and prophetic statements that I've heard. But I think, every time you look at the Me Too movement, we've seen it in Korea, we've seen it in China, we've seen it. I haven't really seen too much going on here in Singapore. I don't really feel like you've got that lecherous element of society, not in public, it's sort of more in private. But majority of societies have got this lecherous element to it, right? And I don't know, it feels like France has sort of woken up to that reality within its society and saying we're not taking in that anymore. Not just the women, it's also the men. It also contributes to men feeling guilty and not empowered, and I think it creates other problems. But I don't know, what's your takeaway?
I mean, firstly, I've never felt safer as a woman than I have in Singapore.
Yeah.
So I'm not fully across what cases are around people being charged or not charged here, but from my own personal lived experience, I find Singapore, as a woman, a liberating place. I suddenly think I've felt recently like this is what it must be like to be a man in other countries, right? I don't text my friends. The last thing I say to my friends isn't text me you got home safely.
Yeah.
I don't worry about my friend that I saw last night if I don't hear from a couple of days. I don't walk down the road with my keys in my hand, on the phone to somebody. All the things
the can
that
of spray, mace, right?
that you just built into your life and it became second nature that you forgot that was actually a stress and a worry that you were carrying. So I just wanted to say that from
on the
that
other side,
perspective.
have you worked in a corporation here, Rebecca? Or have you always worked for yourself while you've
No,
been
not here in Singapore. That's what I said. I can only talk about my and
Yeah.
obviously, there's a lot of there's a lot of people from all around the world. So there's French people here and Americans and British and
yeah.
all of that. But no, not internally. No,
But one
not
of the
sorry,
things
not that.
one of the things I always say about the Me Too movement is what it did was it made all men feel uncomfortable, which I thought was a negative outcome. Because all women know who the creeps are. All women. The creep that walks into the room, all the girls are like, watch him. He's a dirty bastard. You watch out for him. And especially when I first came to Asia, there'd be certain foreign senior leaders coming through. And I'd say to the girls, don't ever be in a room alone with him. You come and you hang out with me. So we're all fully aware of who the creeps are. So normal men who are just behaving in a normal way shouldn't have to change their behavior or feel that we've done a lot of harm to men. And there's a story later on where we're going to talk about how men are really losing their place in the world. And men who are not happy, who are not confident, who are not economically independent, who are not sexually sort of empowered, all of those things, that's not good for society. It's not good for society, right? But the one thing I'd say about Singapore is even in the workplace, the creeps, they're just not there. They're just not there. I mean, foreigners maybe, but as far as the Singaporean culture goes, just not there. Steve's saying, I reckon there's creepy folks everywhere, France, Singapore, everywhere. And he's absolutely right. But within Singapore
100%
society,
right.
Yeah.
It's 100% right. But I think, and when you talk about the Me Too movement in France that followed, Britain that followed, America that followed it, is that for some cultures it's been allowed, it's been excused, and therefore it's been allowed to grown. Well, I mean, what's the most disappointing thing about the people that so let's say in industry, so in like the film industry, when it comes out, apparently everybody always knew. The men knew, the women knew, but they created a power around them that meant that they were untouchable. their sainthood, their talent, you can be talented and a creep, right? Similar with Al Fayed, there's been a lot of allegations that apparently it was just commonly known.
Yeah.
And you think that's, I think, what the Me Too movement isn't just about. One, it's obviously about women understanding that this is not their fault. This is actually more common, and it was never about them. But is that societal shift towards going, whether you're a man or a woman, saying to somebody when they make a lewd comment, you know what, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Because I've got a friend in the UK as a psychologist in the prison service, and what she says is that those microaggressions, when you let them happen, and sometimes they're rewarded with a giggle or a high five, it makes them bolder. And then they go on, and then they might touch, and they get away with it because nobody stops them, so they get braver. And I think when you perhaps talk about, a society like Singapore, it's not culturally acceptable, it's not culturally done, whereas these cultures been allowed to grow in other countries, until you get, like you say, a moment in time where people are like, do you know what, now is enough.
Yeah. So Steve's saying, I think every culture has massively grown up in this regard over the past 4 years, whether it be certain countries or the workplace. And to an extent, I do agree with that. But on the other side, I actually think it's part of a lot of the problems that we're seeing in the world with so there's a New York Times, we kind of had it right at the end, but basically saying it's not just a feeling. Data shows boys and men, young men, are falling behind, and they're talking about their educational achievement, their career achievement, their mental health, all of those sort of things. And like I said, that's a dangerous place for us as a society to be. We need to take care of our boys, and we need to help our boys, and they need something different to what females
There's
need.
some great people in Singapore. There's Dr. Emma Waddington from Us Therapy, who is partnering with Dr. Neil Forrest from Osler Health, and they've been round to a lot of schools in Singapore with a talk called "What About Our Boys?" And this is exactly the conversation that they are having. How do you empower boys at this time, and how do you support them in when you've got an online world that is the manosphere creating one thing, and then people being like, well, all boys are this and all boys are typical boy behavior, and they're like, oh, but these people are now beginning to understand me because that's how things like the manosphere work, right? So yeah, it's incredibly important to balance that. So I just wanted to share that there is that work happening in schools here through two very, very fabulous people, actually.
Yeah, nice. And we know adolescence, it sort of really changed a lot of things. I think it's opened up the conversation. I'm raising two boys. They're 17 and 18, and I've always, my husband and I always keep an eye on them, and how are they feeling? What's worrying them? But most teenage boys won't have that attention of their parents. We eat every meal together. We spend a lot of time with our kids. We do everything we can to make sure that they're whole, right? We talk to them about the concept of having respect for themselves and respect for other people. We put in a lot of time and effort to our boys because we believe that once we release them out into the world, we want them to be good men in the world, right? But we also have to talk to them about how the world views young men, so that they're prepared for that. I've had some fascinating conversations with my boys where, the concept of consent is something they've learned at school all the way through, right? They're very, very much aware of it, but they've been accused by young girls of not asking for their consent, which was absolutely untrue. And then the boys come home and they're like, but these girls, they're horrible, And I'm like, no, don't feel negative towards the young girls. Let's talk about this. Let's see how we can, so I don't want them to ever sort of flip that way. So I think we've got work to do with young girls too.
Absolutely. I've got one of each.
Yeah.
And I don't know which one I'm more scared for or of.
Yeah. Well, Joe's got 4 girls. So, I mean, you've kind of facing it from that perspective, right? You want them respected out in the world.
Well, I mean, I think the challenge, or the reason why there isn't so much of a challenge in Singapore is this thing about the power dynamic, right? Because you think about it, it's not the creep that you really worry about because all the girls know. It's the creep with
Mm.
power, right? That's
Yeah.
the real
Yeah.
problem. So there is this thing I think in Singapore, which is very interesting is that there really isn't as much of a chasm in terms of one level of power and the next, right? So you're seldom faced with someone which has so much power to change your life and your perspective on everything that like your opportunities, stuff like that. When you think about the things that happen like for Hollywood or places like that, it's about the
Mm.
stratosphere that you want to have access to, and then you get the price is paid in respect to that, right? So
Yeah.
I'm
Yep.
giving up on that opportunity to radically change my situation.
Yeah.
So you make choices like that. So it's all to do with the price of things, the price of
Yeah.
status, the price of access. And if you can
Mm.
hold enough of that over someone, you can get them to do a lot of things. So
Mm.
Yeah.
I feel sometimes that it's we like I think in terms of misogyny or when it comes to sex, that gets the obvious kind of disdain, but there's so many other ways that people actually are aggressive towards each other as well in terms of
Yeah.
status, right? Which we go, okay, that's kind of okay. They're rude to me because I don't matter as much or whatever. And we go like, well, that's kind of it's not as egregious as the sexual advance, right?
Mm.
I mean, I have actually very mixed feelings about this. I think sometimes we overemphasize the punishment for certain kinds of behavior uh, because it's been defined as it's fashionable in that sense. So you think about recently, if you talk about rolling back about a year, right? This thing about saying the wrong pronouns. I mean
Mm.
that that got crazy, right? And it got crazy
Yeah.
because the people on the inside felt they had to get angry, and they had people who were on the out people who weren't involved as well had to get angry about the about using the wrong pronouns and not being allowed to use pronouns and what have you. It's just nuts sometimes. What we should do is go like, okay, let's step back and go like, okay, could we just regard each other as human beings, um, and go from there, right?
Yeah.
And I know that I'm comfortable with. I am comfortable with some people saying some things to me which would seem very rude, but because you're my friend and we have a relationship, I go like, I'm actually okay with that, but it makes somebody else uncomfortable, and I go like, okay, what do I do with that? And why are we all obliged to say, okay, well, yeah, okay, let's never do that again. And because it's so nuanced, it's hard to do. So
Yeah.
I can't imagine myself as the teenage Joe that I was, kind of navigating the world right now. It's mad. There's so many things I did as a boy which I know was uh, because I was there. I knew my intention was perhaps innocent, right? I mean, I used to get along really well with girls, right? I could speak to them, talk about anything and all that, and I would I
Used
would
to.
play around. Sorry.
You only used to. You still do all right by the girls.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but I'm look. I can tell you what I did as a young boy without any kind of malintent, which I thought was
Mm.
just funny, which would absolutely not work, right? Because I was dexterous, all right, and this is gonna sound terrible. I'm just gonna say it for the example, right? As a 13-year-old, rather innocent boy, I was in a co-ed school and knew how to unhook a girl's bra, which is a skill which I seem to have lost. But I did that to a friend. She was embarrassed, but it was not meant as any kind of creepy thing. I'm sure everybody else would have thought the same thing as well, but it was just playing. It was just me playing with a friend.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think now if I was growing up today, I'd be a whole different person.
Well, there's a lot more access. The average 13, well, the average 8 or 9-year-old has access to pornography now. So the average 13-year-old, when you were that age, didn't have that education. It was still a very innocent age for the majority of 13-year-olds, right?
Well, do you know, my son's desperate to go on TikTok and Snapchat because his friends are. What he said to me is, I wish nobody was on it, but because they are, I want to be, right?
How
You know,
old
I
is
don't want to
he?
be left. He's 12. I don't
Right.
want to be left out. But I've said to him, like, we and Dad have thought about it, and we are going to say no. How long we will say no for, I don't know. Things change. We'll assess things. But I saw a report that said if you set up a social media account on the likes of TikTok, as a teenage boy, it takes 17 minutes on average before extreme misogynistic content is shown to you.
Yeah.
And that to me was why I'm like, oh, sorry, son, you've just lost another year. Because it's when those things become normalized and you've got a young, impressionable brain. And when things become normalized, you don't realize, and that's, you know, with a lot of things where people say, oh, it's just banter. It was just banter, homophobic banter or sexist banter. And for a long time, it was normalized. So people were like, but we've always done this. What's the problem? No one took offense. Well, actually, yes, they did. But it wasn't okay for them to say so. As a woman, you got sensitive or, you know, or whatever. And so that's one of the dangers, I think, of social media for young minds is the normalization of certain things that are said, the way that they're said them, and the viewpoints.
So my perspective on this one is about my perspective on this is a bit different from yours in terms of I really think that you need to expose them to the material and content and kind of guide them and sort of have those discussions, because it's because people get radicalized when they discover something that they've never had any thoughts about, right? So that's the real danger. And if you've never had thoughts about this topic, when you get this really new interesting idea, you go like, that absolutely makes sense, because it fills the void that I've had before. I didn't have a real perspective on this. I got you. I understand. The earth is flat. Right, because
I do agree, Joe. I do agree with that. And the thing is, like, he's on he has YouTube, for example, right? So it's a case of like limiting it and stopping, you know, having multiple channels and multiple streams. And even when they're not on it, these things are discussed in school. You know, kids who never had access to social media were still using words like skibbity, right? Because things start online and then come offline, and whether you're online or not, it infiltrates and you become, you know, aware. So those, you know, I sat and watched Adolescence with him. I watched it on my own, and then I sat and watched it with my 12-year-old son to have exactly those conversations, and guide through it. It was very interesting seeing the brain going, but she was really unkind to him. I was like, she was really unkind to him. Yeah, absolutely. The girl was unkind. She was wrong. She was nasty. And then, you know, where does that conversation go? How would you have felt around that? What could he have done better? Who could he have gone and spoken to?
But I got to tell you, I'm 100% with Joe. You can't stop him, and the chances are he's probably got a secret account that you don't even know about. So when the boys first started going onto those platforms, I said, that's fine, but you have to follow me, and I have to follow you. Most of the problem we've got with parents is they're not on the platforms their kids are on.
That's another reason I don't want them on it.
Because it's a horrible platform.
Or TikTok.
But what I found really interesting is as I was hearing about these negative sort of manosphere type forces, like especially Andrew Tate, I sort of said to my boys, what do you think of Andrew Tate? And they're like, oh, he's an absolute idiot. I'm like, oh, okay. Because their friends were loving him, but they weren't. Donald Trump, what do you think? And a lot of their opinions were, they're really well thought out. So I think if you communicate with your kids, if you talk to your kids, if you talk about these issues, give them some trust. If there's someone that you find particularly revolting and they like them, talk to them about it. Why? What do they say? Watch some stuff with them. I think we've just got to be more involved. We've got to be more involved. And the problem is a lot of parents just can't be.
But there's a lot of evidence coming from a lot of countries around the, like, never mind access to the manosphere, but the impacts on mental health for children
Absolutely.
spending so much time online.
Yep.
And so to me, if I can limit some of the platforms, then you're limiting some of the need to be on it so much. I mean, we have screen time and I have all the things in place that I can have in place. But yeah, my son's told me, oh, I can get around it. He says, I
Yeah,
don't,
exactly.
but I could.
Yeah, exactly. They can do whatever they want. And the reality is, it's the bigger discussion, should kids even have access to it anyway?
No.
But is it going to go away?
I wish they didn't have to, at least. I wish they didn't have to, at least.
Is it going to go away? No. So what can we do? So obviously the education institutions, fundamentally parents have a job, and peer groups, and we've got to work harder. Too many parents are hands off, and we've got to
one of the things you said earlier is when like technology comes out, like what for the future, and I feel like social media kind of snuck up on us, and sometimes you don't even know the repercussions until it's there, and it is always hard to roll back.
Mm-hmm.
But what you see in New Zealand and Australia with the banning of social media for under 16s, I personally think is a positive move. Like, is it going to stop them all being on it? Absolutely not. But it's like not legalizing sex or cigarettes or alcohol. Yes, people will do that underage, but it sets a tone as a society about what is safe for people of certain ages. And the evidence is showing that, not even from like from a manosphere, but the amount of attention. The attention. My friend had a tutor for her daughter, and he said, can you keep her off YouTube for an hour before our lessons? Because to switch from 30-second, 2-minute, 5-minute short content and then sit down and concentrate for 45 minutes on one thing, it's incredibly hard for the brain to do.
And now those very same companies that brought social media into the world are the ones that are bringing AI into the world, right?
So and who never let their children on it.
No, but they've already messed up global democracy. They've already messed up the brains and the mental health of our young kids. And now they're the ones that are behind AI. Excellent. What a great path forward, God, we're stupid, It's like, all right, let's move on. So Australia, the Liberal Party, which is the equivalent, as far as I'm concerned, of the Republican Party in Australia, has finally appointed its first female leader. And obviously they lost the female vote. They lost the youth vote. The Liberal Party, which was under Peter Dutton, got a bit of a kick in the ass in the last Australian election. But Rebecca, you were pretty chuffed about that, yeah?
What, that they got their butts kicked? I wasn't sorry. And actually, one of the things I've really, oh, you mean about the women being as the leader? Well, so one thing that was on the last time was the number of females standing as independents, who actually unseated quite a lot of Liberals previously, the Teals, and there was a lot of press around how they were, they were a one hit wonder. But actually, quite a lot of them have kept their seat. A lot of
completely changed Australian politics.
For the better, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's really positive. Now, I think that we need more women in all levels of government, all levels of corporate, and we need diversity at every level. And I don't know too much about this Susan, but one of the things before I dive into her a little bit, one of the things that when you look at the UK is, and we look at our female leaders, and my husband's always like, well, show me an example of a good female leader, right? And I say to him, the problem is that to succeed, even as a woman, you have to be like a man. So the women in the party who tended to raise themselves up are those that don't have the strong feminine traits of empathy and openness. And so a lot of the women leaders have just been like men in skirts, essentially, in terms of like how they operate and how they've had to operate to succeed within those structures. Suzanne apparently describes herself as a feminist, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next few years. She said that she's going to go back to basics. They are going to review everything and take a deep dive into all of their policies. She said she wants to represent all Australians. She understands they lost the women's vote. She understands that they lost the youth vote. And it's interesting that when we talk about, you know, the rise of Trump and all of this, and, you know, every country has its own nuances, but there was, you know, that taught that this was a rejection of the way that the world has gone. And we also saw that in Canada as well. So both of those election results were ones that made me breathe a little bit easier. Interestingly, right, for somebody, when we talk about things that you'd expect to find on the left or right of politics, things that are a little bit woo don't tend to align themselves so much with the right. So her name was originally spelt with one S. Now it's spelt
Yeah, I
with
saw that.
two S's in the middle. And she read in numerology, if the letters in your name add up to a certain number, you will have a more successful, more prosperous life. So she added in an extra S, and I guess then it never got it changed back. But she said it was you know, at that point things began to change and began to turn. So it's
not what I was expecting from a Liberal Party leader.
Not what I was expecting either. You know, when I look into how she's voted, there's things that I agree with her on. So she voted to legalise same-sex marriage, but she voted no in the Voice. But so did most of Australians. So it's nothing, nothing very weird there. So I think that time will tell whether she will change and shape the Liberal Party into a party that can challenge at the next election and be a more modern party. It definitely needed a clean sweep, I think. And I very much believe that we need strong oppositions in all governments. You know, regardless of whether you're left wing or right wing or Labour or Liberal, what we need is strong oppositions, so that whatever party's in power, the other can really hold them to account. So we need a strong Liberal Party in Australia,
and a respect for consensus too, right? That's one of the things that we've lost. Okay, so we've got lots of other things to on our list, but I want to I want us to make sure that we don't go past the 2-hour mark. One of the things that you may, so I'm just going to give you a couple of climate change ones. So the first thing is deep sea mining. So there's a deep sea mining experiment that happened like 50 years ago, and it still hasn't recovered. So what they're looking at doing is there's these nodules. They're like the size of a potato, and they're called polymetallic nodules, and they're obviously all part of the future, the sustainable future, right? All the precious metals that we need for cars and phones and all that sort of stuff. And basically, the global sort of response is we should not do this. And the other thing is they believe that they actually contribute to oxygen on the planet. These nodules take millions and millions of years to grow. So just by removing them it's not a good idea. Anyway, basically Trump's basically going past all of that. And there's this guy, and his name's Gerard Barron. He's the CEO of the seabed mining company, the Metals Company, basically said, the thing that people have missed is that there is zero chance that this will not happen. So I found that a really interesting statement. Another thing that's sort of just come up in recently, it's basically talking about the future for our kids. So youth face unprecedented lifetime exposure to climate extremes. Kids today are basically going to grow up in a hellscape. So a child born in 2020 will experience 2 to 7 times more extreme climate events than someone born in the 1960s. And this is things like heat waves, floods, droughts, wildfires, cyclones, and crop failures. So, and this is based on just a sort of an average sort of warming, which is basically right now they're saying we're going to get to 2.7 degrees Celsius. When I was reading through this, the one thing people kind of miss is when everyone talks about risk, they talk about everything in a really linear perspective. So I was listening to a technology futurist recently, and they're like, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And I'm like, yeah, but when you do this, all of these things will happen. And it's the same with the climate, right? So extreme heat, what does it do? Creates food insecurity because there's more drought, there's less food available, food's going to cost more money, more starvation, da 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 da. So when they sort of talk about they're going to be exposed to all of these extreme weather events, they're also going to be exposed to all of these other impacts, including access to food, food inflation, food insecurity, and then things like water wars, all that sort of stuff. So anyway, that's an interesting one. But here's a final one that I think we can finish with. The most dangerous country on earth for a woman who is pregnant. Do you know the answer to that?
Because I've read your form. Only because I've read your notes.
Did it surprise you?
Yeah. Well, living here, it's pretty hot.
Yeah.
So
the most dangerous place on the planet to be pregnant is in Singapore. The good news is it's also the most resilient place. So the women who are pregnant in Singapore will be taken care of. And as long as the infrastructure holds up, they'll have somewhere to go and be cool, right? So, yeah, I thought that was a really interesting one.
Yeah. I would not wanted to have been pregnant. I mean, considering I got to the size of an elephant and waddled like a radioactive duck, I would not want to have been pregnant in this country for sure. I don't think I could have handled. I did one in Australia and it was like hot over the summer, but there's no humidity stuff, not like that here. I can't imagine. I'd have just stayed in my air-conditioned flat here, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a real need for the adjustment of what is the standard for what is tolerable temperatures and conditions, because it really has changed over the years. But my helper, who's not pregnant but still just running an errand downstairs, has come back really quite exhausted from the process, and that's it's just going downstairs, going to the market next door, being exposed to the heat like that, and I realized that what is missing is an understanding of the danger. So people feel the discomfort of it. They think it's an uncomfortable thing to be outside. They don't realize that they're actually in a possibly life-threatening situation. You know, they just so they might even feel that they're being weak by not by trying to find shelter and stuff like that. And it's perfectly it's like having an umbrella now. It's really okay. You should have an umbrella.
Yeah. Oh no, you've convinced me, Joe. No, it's a really interesting one, because I see a lot of. Oh, it's always hot at this time of year. I'm like, okay, so this news, which was published in Eco Business, and Robin just was commenting earlier, the number of dangerously hot days for pregnant women doubled between 2020 and 2024 in 90% of countries studied. Singapore is the most at-risk country in Asia for pregnant people, but Singapore is also the most resilient city in the entire region. So high temperature during pregnancy, and we're hearing about like women are out in the farms in India, in Bangladesh, in the heat, they're losing babies, losing their own lives, but basically increases the risks of complications such as stillbirth, gestational diabetes, and premature labor, which can lead to lifelong conditions. When I read the news, of course, being in the country where it's the worst, 11 out of the 57 countries in Asia experience at least one additional month of pregnancy risk, and that's obviously going to get worse. Brunei is one of the worst affected in the region, and if you go to Brunei, there's it's a very, very wealthy country because of oil, but there's a lot of people who live like in those villages on stilts in the water. Then you've got places like Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, where a lot of the people who were there working in rice fields, doing a lot of outdoor labor like construction, the females too, driving taxis, tuk-tuks, that sort of stuff. So there are a lot of people, and I think one of the things we've got to look at doing is, one, how do we make sure the women are safe? How do we make sure that they get the nutrition to a healthy baby? But also, where can they go in extreme heat conditions? What sort of work should they be doing? I think if countries are looking at the future for their societies, they've got to take care of these women, and they're the ones that get the least attention because they're poor. But there's no future without them. Especially they're growing the food, they're taking care of the societies. They're the ones that are really on the front line doing the work that matters. So I think it's I thought it was a big wake up call that we're in danger, and we've got to know about it. We've got to understand it. Singapore experienced 88 days. It usually experiences 4 above wet bulb temperatures just last year. 88 days.
Mm.
Oh, was it 100? Wait a minute, it might be 188 days. I'll find it and share it. But yeah, so it's always been this way. It's getting hotter. James Hansen released a report. He basically was talking about there's less clouds, so the Earth is getting darker, and as glaciers melt and there's more dark land underneath, or oceans underneath, we're absorbing more of the heat, which is creating the Earth energy imbalance, which is why we're seeing an increase in temperatures. So it's serious. Learn about it. Understand what wet bulb temperatures are. Understand what heat stroke looks like. If you're outside, you get woozy. Get inside to somewhere cool as quick as you can. And also, there's long-term ramifications of heat exposure. That's something that people aren't really talking about. I think one of the things that we're going to have to provide in the future is mobile kidney dialysis units, because as you out in heat, even if it doesn't kill you, it's going to destroy your kidneys. So you're going to need that down the track. So this is the world that we're in now. It's only going to get hotter, even if we do everything. So yeah, not necessarily a happy one to leave you on, but
Well,
okay. I'll give you one happy story.
Okay.
I'll give you one happy story. All right, and then we'll say goodbye before we do our final. The Pope, the new Pope, has a MAGA brother. He's in Florida, and he's promised to tone it down a little bit. Yeah, the Pope's got a MAGA brother. Can you imagine it?
That's classic nature versus nurture, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Well, I think the Pope's history on voting has been Republican as well, right? I mean, that's the other thing they found out. But it was back in the good old days.
I haven't seen that bit.
No, the Pope's, yes, he's voted in Republican primaries, and there's no record of him voting in Democratic primaries. He has voted in a Republican primary, I think, for the last 8 years. So, and the thing is when you look back, it's not as simple as like, I can imagine kids growing up now and be like, I'd never be a Republican. But actually, has been some good, Republican American presidents who achieved things during, their time. And at the minute, it's done this. And I think, Joe, you go back to what you said right early on is you stay the same. And once upon a time, you could quite comfortably vote Republican, and that would, whereas now the Republicans have moved further to the right, where you've stayed where you are, and you're like, okay, so now, we can't judge people of the past on I suppose the politics of today.
No, and the politicization of the Pope is obviously a fascinating thing. The woke Pope and MAGA's going nuts. Because he cares for the poor and the disenfranchised. It's been absolutely fascinating. There's never been coverage following a papal election ever, but I've never seen it of the scale that it's happening. And obviously because there's so many stories that they can pull, because he speaks English. There's history.
Well, the first amazing. American Pope in itself has been, is a story, and traditionally they said because there was already so much power with the likes of America, they looked for for people to have soft power, and balance that elsewhere. But I think there could not be a better time for a woke American Pope.
Yeah, but he's not really woke.
They can make the Vatican great again.
Yeah, but he's not really woke. He's just a pope, right?
Well, but
that's kind of making a mockery of the term woke, right? And finally, it's kind of, to me,
I think the point is
the word out there is because it's such a ridiculous word. It's always been a ridiculous word, and calling the Pope woke, it's like.
Well, I think the previous Pope was, had, what we called I say liberal as in liberal values as opposed to liberal party values, liberal values. But previously, their views on women, their views on abortion, their views on homosexuality, have put and then, there's been an evolution with the last Pope and this Pope on their views of the conversations that they're prepared to have. And I just think it's a bit of I know woke and Pope don't exactly rhyme, but I think that there's a rhyming thing there that fits too.
Yeah, but he's still not pro women ordination. He's still not pro LGBTQI plus. Like that, none of that has changed. He's just a Pope who cares about the climate and the earth, and taking care of the poor. Now, no. So to me, it's like it's like surely this will finally cancel out the word woke, because if the Pope's not woke, then nobody should be called woke, right? Because they're supposed to be good. All right, what are you doing? What are you listening to? What's keeping you distracted, Joe? Give us your.
Well, I've been going all about the dial, and recently I've been consuming a lot of a podcast called Science Versus. Right, so it's a podcast by I want to say an Australian. She definitely has an Australian accent, but I think she's also an American. Zuckerman, but the show is very interesting because it takes on a lot of the topics of the world. And recently they took up things like fluoridation in water, right? And what they do is they take it from a very scientific perspective. They look at scientific papers and they review and they look at balance for different topics. So if you're interested to find out about the science of various topics, what's actually interesting is that no matter which side of the political fence you are, it's likely you'll get disappointed. So the like the people who are like fluoridation of water, it's always been seen as the thing that's it's just a no-brainer. It's a good thing to do, right? And when they did the scientific research, they found that, well, there is a little bit of a case for being cautious about fluoridation. And they talk about the circumstances where it has proven to be dangerous and where it doesn't make a difference, and what have you. And they get criticized all the time because they're not woke enough as well when it comes to science. So there is a popular idea that science is woke, and it isn't. Science is science. It
Yeah.
tries to figure out what it is, and the branding of seems to be that if you're really, really open to all kinds of things, then you're going to be more woke, and therefore science should be more woke. It seldom is either. But if you want to find out the truth about a number of things and a number of topics that you probably will not normally hear about in the mainstream, go check it out. They have a long history of exploring different topics, and it's always scientifically based.
I love that. All right,
Yeah, I've
Rebecca.
heard similar things, Joe. I've actually spent quite a lot of time listening to, well, these functional medicine, people in the functional medicine space, which is very much around root cause. But they too have been criticized as left wing because it's anti-pharmaceutical, the way that we've been thinking. But you see, science evolves, right? Our knowledge evolves, and I think if you've got a fixed mindset that, and what is true in science, you talk about what is a fact. Well, even science isn't a fact. All it is the fact of what we know today. We thought the atom was the smallest particle. That was a fact. And then we learn more, and so I think one of the most important things is that we always keep an open mind when it comes to science and facts. I'm enjoying a podcast by some local women here called the 40s Formula. So it's mostly designed for women in their 40s and beyond, and it discusses all sorts of things around health and well-being. And I listened to a really interesting article about how ADHD presents differently in women, and it was quite a interestingly when you start nodding along to most of the things that they say that you perhaps normalized or think was just you, or it was just your struggle to had, and other people found things easy and you didn't, and why you may have done that was a really, really good, really, really interesting podcast. That's the 40s Formula.
Okay, and that's a Singapore-based one, is it?
Yeah, so Amanda and Jasmine. Jasmine's a nutritionist and health coach, and Amanda is a kind of fitness and nutrition coach. They both run their own businesses here.
Okay, nice
and
one.
they've interviewed predominantly, it's only Singapore-based guests at the minute because they film and film their podcasts, so it's all in person.
Yeah, no, it's good for them. Good to give a local show a bit of a push. I'm just trying to remember. So Rebecca, I try to watch things that just tickle my brain when I'm not paying attention to the news because I pay so much attention to the news. So I'm always looking for distractions. But there's a new short movie called Nonnas. Have you seen that on Netflix?
Heard good things.
It's just lovely. It's about a guy loses his mum, sets up a restaurant, and hires Italian grandmas who can cook the food of love. And so it's just one of those really nice little, makes your heart smile. And I was just trying to remember, I've just started following this new podcast, but I can't remember it. But if you want a news podcast, wait a minute. Oh, there you go. Steve likes that one. There's a podcast called The Daily Blast, and it's Greg Sargent. If you're looking for something like when you're cooking the dinner, it's about long enough for that, and it talks about what's going on in the US. So if you want a really quick rundown, it gets really fantastic guests. It's sort of 10, 15, 20-minute podcasts. So I struggle to find the time to listen to podcasts because I can't do things at the same time when I'm listening. So I can go for a walk and listen, but I can't, So cooking and podcasting is a good one. So The Daily Blast, if you're looking for one. But if you want to look for something lovely to watch, Nonnas. And we just finished watching 0 Day. Have you seen?
Oh yeah, I saw that.
No.
Just I don't know. I'm a bit tired of American culture. Like it's just. Like I haven't been able to watch an American war movie for years, and my husband and my sons love watching them. A Vietnam War movie, a World War One, Gulf War. I can't watch them anymore because it's an American perspective on a complicated story, right? And I'm finding that just generally American culture and kind of a bit over it.
Well, you should watch. What's it called now? It has Zero in it as well, but it's the Godzilla movie. That was one to watch.
Godzilla.
Yeah. Hang on, I think is it Godzilla Zero? I'm not sure. Let me. It won the award for. It's award winning. It won the award for special effects at the Oscars.
Okay.
It's called Godzilla -1. Godzilla
Okay.
-1. Yeah, it's good. I mean,
All right. So anything Australian, British, anything not American, nice stories, tickle your brain stuff, podcasts that are,
Have you watched Anatomy of a Scandal on the BBC? I think it's BBC. Set in Westminster with a politician who has an affair with his political aide, who then accuses him of rape, and it goes to court. And I won't say any more because it's good. It's good. And there's a nice twist.
Okay. All right. So if anyone's ever got any ideas of things that tickle my brain, I'm always open to it. So anyway, Rebecca, thank you so much for coming. I've got your details down here on the screen, but you're on LinkedIn, so reach out to Rebecca. She's awesome. Joe, good to see you, darling. And great chat. Lots of topics.
Thanks so much, guys.
We didn't get through everything. Hope you enjoyed it, Rebecca.
No, I loved it. Thanks.
Yeah. We'll have to have it back. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, definitely. I think someone's well qualified, just gone through the whole vetting process. I think she's okay.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Take care, everyone. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Bye.